Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers, on the air since 2014 as Santa Barbara's most popular, most awarded, and only local news analysis and commentary program. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, April 21st, 2023, and for those still swirling from the week-long celebration of 420 and our cannabis ordinance, we're here to talk about all the essential local news you may have missed. I'm very pleased to welcome back our all-star panel of top local journalists: Ryan P. Cruz, staff writer for The Independent; Nick Welsh, executive editor and star columnist, award-winning columnist, one might say, for The Indy; and Josh Molina, man of many moods, and the Joe Rogan of local podcasting. Thanks, guys, for being here. Okay, it's budget season when reporters all scramble to try to understand numbers, which is never a strength of them. And we learn the difference between a deficit and a debt. Let's start with the city budget. Josh, you had an interesting piece, which led with $344.5 million in unfunded pension liability. That was an excellent take, I thought, and a good way to get into it. And why are we learning of this now? Is it because Keith DeMartini has replaced the disappeared Bob Samario as finance director, or how did this come to light?
Well, surprise, I'm very frustrated with the city administration because they had their budget hearing on Tuesday, but it was sort of a meeting to talk about the budget hearings that are going to come. So it was sort of this broad brush overview. They released it the day of the meeting, so not 72 hours in advance like you're supposed to. The agenda item was there, but if you really wanted to understand the budget, you really couldn't, because they released it the day of the meeting. All municipalities, all governments are reeling throughout California from pension and pension debt and pension liability. All of this is your buddy Gray Davis's fault, and the deals that he cut with the prison guards and
corrections officers, Josh.
Sorry, the corrections officers, the law enforcement, CHP. And so then it trickled down, and all of a sudden everybody who worked for government wanted these kinds of pensions. And it's like, well, if the city doesn't do it, then they're going to go to the county. And if the county doesn't do it, they're going to go over here. So there's massive pension liability that the city has. It was not announced. It was not anything shared, but it's real. They said we have unfunded pension liability. And so the issue is they've taken steps to reform this. They have multi-tiered systems. They are investing in a different way to get more of a sure return in order to pay off these liabilities. But it is a significant pension or significant budget hit, because when you retire, part of the deal of going to work for government is the guarantee of an income once you retire at 50, 55, 62, whatever it is. And so the city is facing a deficit, a shortfall of 1.1 million next year, not a big deal, but then it jumps up to 4.8 the following year. And then largely that is due to the pension reform, which is going to be a big bump then.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I started covering budgets, municipal budgets, back before the last ice age. And at the time, voters consistently voted for more benefits, pensions, and the Board of Supervisors, City Council routinely awarded them, because the deal was you made less in salary working for the government, and therefore you made up for it with these benefits. Two things are now true. A, they're not making less. They're making a very good wage. And B, at the time, almost everybody had a pension. I mean, if you worked in the private sector, there were pensions. Now nobody does. But yet we continue to dole out these defined benefit pensions.
Well, you should be happy that government is not winning the race to the bottom. That's what you should be happy about.
Oh, is that right? Here you go. Here you go again. There you go again.
Retrograde, reactionary, get off my front lawn, conservative. I mean, it's an issue. It's a real issue. But I guess my question is, at any point in time, you can always go, oh my God, there's some huge, overwhelming number of unfunded budget pension liabilities every fucking year. Excuse me. And
Now I gotta.
sorry.
It's all right. You know who's
Um,
on about it now is KCSB.
And
Oh.
it's just, I mean, I saw, okay, this is a problem, but usually you try out the unfunded pension liability when you don't want to give your union guys a pay increase. The other thing that
Well,
is going on, I think, is that the unfunded pension liability grows as the stock market performs less robustly. So when the stocks go up, the pensions have to make up the difference. And
I would like
that comes on the city governments and local
Yeah,
governments.
I
but
would
it's
like to
like-
note, I would like to note that I pulled the pension number out myself.
Oh,
Keith DeMartini, I asked him the day of. He said, I will get that tomorrow and get it back to you. So I don't think they were in this case sort
Okay.
of like, let's use it as
Josh,
negotiation.
on your instant analysis, Keith DeMartini, more or less effective and useful than Bob Samario
More
in terms of not in never
more useful, more useful,
I
more
better
useful.
drop
no, he's really good. He's
Yeah,
really
good. Okay, good. All right. Well, so Nick says they're not, they're, that it's out there about pay raises, but if the city's got an ongoing deficit, you have to balance the budget. That doesn't sound like pay increases should be on the table, are they?
No, well, what they did say was labor costs are an issue in the budget going forward. Recruitment and retention are issues. So they did allude to it, but they're going to do the deep dives on the actual budget department by department, and they're starting that this week or next week. So they're going to do all of that. But I just think it's frustrating because the city spent so much time. Look at our interactive tool, and it's just so much transparency, but they actually did not have a pension number in the budget that they presented. It was very broad stroke. But to get to Nick's point, so in case Keith DeMartini is watching, he's really good.
He better be.
He's much better. But on this day, government was sort of just trying to make everybody think everything was bad, but not that bad.
All right. Well,
this is the exhibition season for budget, right? So that's what we're playing. This is exhibition season, so you don't have your starting quarterback in because you're going to get injured.
God, geez. The master of spending other people's money, Nick Welsh. Okay.
Okay, here's the deal, Jerry. I totally hear you, but the problem is, it's the problem. It's the story everywhere you go. Guess what? The city's planning department, a quarter of the positions are vacant. Because why? Because they can't keep people. Cops. How many cops don't we have? Because they can't afford it. You can talk about, defunding the police and all that, and that does enter into it. But, money matters. And
all right. I want to get to the county budget, but let me just have the last word on this. And when I referenced the 70s and covering budgets, that finally ended with Proposition 13 in 1978 because people get really sick of this stuff. And, we'll see what happens. The planet is burning up. So I suppose this is small potatoes anyway. All right, Ryan, you had a piece on the county budget, which God forbid is $1.4 billion, being administered by people who have about 12 cents in their checking accounts. But be that as it may, I was very interested in your numbers on the big three taxes, the tax revenue sources.
Yeah.
Transit occupancy tax, the hotel tax revenue increased by 16%. You write to 17 million. Sales tax revenue increased by 6% to 15 million. But cannabis continues to stick out like a sore green thumb, with a 54% decrease to a projected revenue of 7.5 million. And you go on to paint even a gloomier picture of that. What's going to happen with that? Are they going to change? I know they were talking about the hearing today. This is breaking news. The change the method of taxation for cannabis.
Yeah, there's a couple different things they can do. So like you said, we're doing really well in property taxes. We're doing well on sales taxes. We're doing well on TOT. Everything's growing. That cannabis though is just at first couple of years it was overperforming, and these past 2 years, what they projected and what actually made, the numbers just aren't matching up. And last year the downfall was, I think it's down to 6 or 7 million, and they really do they're really looking on what they can change. And one thing they can do is they can change to square footage. So that's something they're looking at, to change instead of gross
Rather
sales,
than
tax
taxing on gross receipts.
yeah, because another problem is underreporting of sales. You know, like you said, it was 420 this week, and sales looked like they were booming. It seemed like, you know, that of course there's a lot of people manufacturing and growing cannabis and selling it now, so the market definitely got oversaturated, and that would be a way to kind of see on an even playing field of how much square footage do you have? Okay, you're going to pay by that, instead of, okay, you're reporting you have sold this much, because some places were reporting we had 0 gross sales, so we have
And
no
it would
tax.
would it also then get to the people who are not paying taxes at all?
So that's another portion. So that's the police budget, which has grown to 200 million, or not police,
Sure.
excuse me, to 200 million. So they're asking for a couple million for a couple different programs. One of them's a narcotics program for, you know, attacking fentanyl, which has, you know, been a huge thing. Another one is a cannabis compliance team, which would be, you know, a 5-person team that would kind of get a scope of where we're at, who's not reporting, how big of a problem is it, who, how many places, like what's really our options of, would that square footage really help close that gap? So the board of supervisors are really going to be looking at how do we, you know, we've had the ordinance for now, what, 6 years? So
Not that long, but
yeah, so they're looking at how we can kind of
2018, didn't it pass?
tighten that up. Yeah, 2018. So how can we tighten that up going forward? And, you know, because cannabis should be bringing in money, if it's not, what do we do?
Well, that was allegedly the whole point. So did you get any sense from the hearing whether Steve Lavanino, for example, would go along with this?
I think it's too early to tell. For any tax changes, as I understand it, since it's a county, it's not a chartered city, so it has to follow the tax codes of the state. So it's a little harder. I think tax codes have to be a 4/5 vote, and then it would go to a ballot to change some of the tax codes. So it's a little bit harder.
yeah, I talked with Steve about it a number of months ago, and he was saying, why not? I mean, initially he was reluctant, but it hasn't worked out. The current system is cumbersome. It's really hard to implement. It's right, you know, opportunity for fraud is obvious. It's a much cleaner way, and it's much more predictable.
Yeah, and it works in other jurisdictions as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. Of course, this was put in place because of the special interests who were behind the scenes writing the ordinance. That concludes my prepared remarks. All right.
Gary, we should just put a link to the LA Times story every time this issue comes up. You know, people can just get the background.
All right, Nick, one of the big issues that you wrote about in the county budget, of course, is mental health services. And, you know, you are doing the Lord's work on this issue and have been for many years. You write that the county desperately needs more acute care beds for those suffering from serious mental health problems. It does not. Is that the binary that the supervisors are facing, more jail or more mental health?
You know, I don't know if they're going to. I know that's how it's being positioned. The existing jail, not the North County one, but the South County jail is a mess, and everybody agrees with that. And as you know, we come out of COVID and they can put more people into jail, you know, they want to fix up the South County jail. The price tag I'm hearing is $24.6 million
For the jail?
For the jail down here. That is a lot of money, and people are definitely getting major sticker shock at that prospect. So there's a couple of ideas that are floating around. One is keep the number of people in jail down lower than the sheriff is inclined to want to do. And I'm hearing, you know, there are numbers that can be justified for that. The other thing is whatever the expansion is, it should take place up in the North County Jail, which is a modern jail, and the opportunities for expansion are reportedly cheaper. I don't know if that's true, but that's what's said. That has its own problems, but you know what is uncontestable. For as long as I've been reporting here, people have been saying, guess what? We don't have a place to take people who are seriously mentally ill.
And is
We
it
have 16 beds in the county PUP.
just as a basic question? Do we know or have a ballpark of, you know, what percentage of people in the county jail are actually, you know, suffering from mental health problems?
There was a number thrown out on Tuesday saying that 1/3 to 1/2 of the people in the county jail have been patients or clients of the county's Department of Behavioral Wellness at some time. Now, the range of acuity is all over the map, you know, but it's Cottage Hospital and Marion Hospital up in Santa Maria. Their emergency rooms have been slammed by people with serious mental health problems. And, you know, the 5150 population, and the numbers dance all over the map and they change. But the reality is there's a massive missing link in terms of the infrastructure.
So we don't have enough beds.
We don't have enough beds. You know, so to put that in perspective, because we don't have enough beds, the county got fined by the state $6 million because we don't have enough places to put people or process people who have been deemed incompetent to stand trial. This doesn't mean that they are not guilty by reason of insanity, but they can't even help with their own defense. They're not competent enough for that. And these people often spend more time behind bars waiting to get sent to a state hospital where they can get competent than they would have if they had been found guilty and served the time of their sentence. So it's a major civil rights issue.
So in terms of the budget politics, is it the case that mental health services would, I mean, they're seeking more money for mental health services, and some of the supervisors are saying, oh, well, I guess we have to take it away from Bill Brown. Is that the dynamic?
We aren't there yet. Just to put it in perspective, oh God, was it 200? I don't even know how many. $175 million, right, for the behavioral wellness budget. About 90% of that, more than that, actually comes from state and federal. Like 3% of that comes from the general fund. So most of it comes from state and federal dollars. But here is sort of the big whammy where that's concerned. Your friend Gavin Newsom, our governor, who is kind of a swing for the fences
Should have
guy.
stayed the parking commissioner. That's
there's a lot to be said for overreach. And he's definitely a great one for overreach. So he says, you know what, we're not doing enough for the mentally ill homeless people. We need housing. We need it now. So he went around the state about a month ago. We had 4 whistle stops. And he said, here's my great plan. Well, part of that great plan was to say that 35% of what you now spend for services to take care of homeless people who are mentally ill, you now have to spend on housing for homeless people who are mentally ill.
So all this money that we get from the state is going to have more strings than ever.
So the strings attached are significant. It's anywhere from $26 to $32 million that they're going to have to redirect. So right now, for example, out in the good city of Zolita, the Goodlands, there's that big Super 8 motel out there which they're converting to homeless housing. Now, that works if there are services available, provided on site. But if this thing were to go through, it would undermine funding for the very services that are required. So again, it's Gavin Newsom swinging for a home. He's not swinging for a home run. He's swinging for a grand slam. But he isn't really dealing with.
I mean,
the
this is what
entity.
this is what he does. You know, he has a press conference, he has a big idea, blah 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 blah. You know, and it becomes totally impractical and it never works. But this
And
would
that is true. But, and I will say this, gay marriage would not be as far along as it got, but for his opportunistic grandstanding way back then.
yes, and George Bush wouldn't have been reelected either. But if you
That's another.
if you ask Nancy Pelosi about it, because they had all those anti-gay marriage
Yes.
initiatives on the ballot in key electoral states. All right. Ryan, you had a piece on the briefing about the airport expansion, which I mean is really quite breathtaking when you think about it. But what struck me in the piece were the comments by Council Member Snedden, Kristen Snedden, who really didn't like the sound of things. She says, it's sounding to me like we're going to let demand dictate the size rather than predetermining the size that we want and limiting to that. When do we have the discussion if that's even what we want? And I'll be really clear, it's not what we want. All right, I will note just in passing that letting demand dictate the size is exactly what they're doing on housing. But be that as it may, what is it that's set her off about the airport?
I think it's the fact that it's kind of that they can't really do much about it. So like they said, the airspace, the demand for flights is going to continue growing because Santa Barbara is an attractive place to come. Tourism industry will keep growing. And that is something they kind of talked about. Eric Friedman asked a little bit about that. Are there any things we can do? And you can't really litigate a lower amount of flights or anything like that. We can't control a cap on flights.
Because it's up to the airlines?
Up to the FAA. So there's some places like Santa Monica or other places that have like a curfew, and anything like that happened before the FAA kind of took over this ruling of the airspace. So it's going to keep growing. Santa Barbara Airport, the demand for airlines to have more flights and more destinations is going to keep growing over the next 20 years. At least that's what they're predicting. And the airlines as a business have the right to keep signing up for more flights and more destinations. And Santa Barbara Airport, as it is now, can physically accommodate that. So if nothing changes, it'll just be a really bad customer experience, is what they're saying.
And it's also the case, is it not, that there's an increasing number of private jets coming in to the airport as well?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a increase. I think the biggest increase is just the overall traffic and seeing it go to, I think they said 1.8 million. They're predicting the annual
numbers
passengers.
are amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers were amazing. And Josh, some of the neighbors are not exactly pleased about all this.
Definitely not.
What?
Yeah, I was again confused by the city's process here, because they had a city council meeting Tuesday, they had a planning commission Thursday on the airport master plan. And then the last thing they did was a open house at the airport administration building. And that's where a lot of the residents went, and they were very upset. They don't want to hear about all this FAA logic reason why nobody can do anything. Like, that's not an answer for these people who have to hear that what they perceive is an increase in the number of jets, and they really do not like Southwest. They think Southwest is the loudest, biggest jet. They feel as though the times should be changed. The last plane leaves at 12:30. The earliest one leaves at 5:20. And some of the older people, the senior citizens that I talk to,
Hey, take it easy.
That's not a pejorative term, Jerry. It's just a word.
Well, I just wonder what you mean when you say senior citizen.
Well, I'm going to explain right now.
What age exactly you're targeting there?
These people, retirement age, said
these people,
we can't get a good night's sleep because the last plane leaves at 12:30 and the first one at 5:20. We need 8 hours sleep.
Let me tell you something. People who are retired can't get a good night's sleep for a lot of other reasons, but go ahead.
And they're frustrated because they live in Goleta or the county. The airport is owned by the city, and Goleta's frustrated. They can't do anything but send angry letters and call for meetings. The county's totally disengaged in this process. So they're frustrated. We can't turn to anybody. And they're getting woken up early in the morning, middle of the night. Some of them express concerns about safety issues, that these planes are flying lower and lower, and they're worried that if something goes wrong, there's going to be a catastrophe. So that's what happened at the workshop. And the airport people, well-intentioned, very nice. They're saying, hey, we're at the beginning of this master plan process. We're going to take this public input. But bottom line, a pilot's a pilot, and they have to take the safest route they can. And if it means flying over people's homes or a little bit lower, they're going to do it. And it's hard to tell them no when they're in the process of doing it. And to go to Ryan's point, the airport doesn't want to turn away business. Like they want more flights. It's more money.
And just to clarify, the airport is in an enterprise agency, correct? In other words, they're generating revenue, which is going to the city. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
they're an
think
enterprise fund.
yeah, I think that's part of the disconnect is that, the airport itself is this plan is great. We're gonna have vertiports for electric flying vehicles and things like that. And the people themselves are like, hey, what about the noise? That's what we want an answer about, but they're not really talking about that. And even in their report, they say, we've looked at the noise contours and we've looked at the effects, and the effects are mitigated. And so I think there's a disconnect of, people feeling like they're yelling into a void and not being heard, which is always kind of hard. And it's just one of those situations where the city can't really do, and it sounds like there's a few council members that would want to do something if they could.
You know what? When I read your piece, I wondered, like, again, there's nothing they can do, but there's things that they can try to do. And have they worked with Salud Carbajal to try to? I don't know whether the needle might be movable.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's any options like that, or if there's anything like that. I'm interested to know if there's any other ways to get around that, or other than the grandfathered in law.
It certainly can't be helping our climate goals.
That's another thing.
Hey, Nick, I've only been here 21 years, but I can remember like it was yesterday, flying into the old ramshackle airport to meet with Joe Cole. But that's a story for another day. But, it really was pretty funky. I mean, it was tiny and small and kind of beat up, and you had to stand in line and stuff. And now I mean, it's really extraordinary that what's been done at the airport and what it looks like. Do you feel, as I do, that this is a sign of the decline of civilization and Santa Barbara as it should be, or do you?
Pretty much everything, Jerry, is a sign that.
Or do you think it's a good thing? I mean, aren't you kind of amazed when you look at it? I mean, you take.
I definitely have a great nostalgic affection for the old sort of thatch hut airport that we used to have. I mean, I remember taking my kids out there when they were little, and you could go practically frolic on the tarmac. But then 9/11 happened, and the security became a much more of a issue.
Yeah. And the other cool thing was, if you went out for a flight, you were almost guaranteed, there's the mayor sitting there going somewhere. Oh, there's Lois Cap. She's gone. I mean, it was very small town kind of thing about it. So, life was better in the old days. Ryan, what can I tell you? Get off my lawn.
Hey, I missed out on that.
Speaking of changes, Nick, in Solvang, which used to have very good relations with the city of Copenhagen, its sister city, it was actually the Lord Mayor, Sophie Haystrop Anderson, as I like to pronounce it, was very unhappy with Solvang today over its recent controversy over LGBT stuff.
He said she was shocked and disappointed that they were not.
I mean, what's going on up there? It's kind of weird, right?
I think what's happening is that the Danish Brotherhood that has enjoyed hegemony.
Is that a real thing? The Danish
capital D. It is a Danish Brotherhood, not to be confused with the Danish Mafia.
Oh, okay.
But the Danish Brotherhood, which has enjoyed hegemony up there for a long time, is now dealing with different stuff and conflict and different visions of what Solvang should be. And you have one council member in particular who is extremely vocal and adamant in his sort of anti-woke, gay grooming agenda talk. His name is Bob Clark, or Robert Clark with an E at the end.
Robert
And
Clarkey. Robert
he-
Clarkey.
He is offended and outraged that there's a bookstore where they're going to have, drag queen reading hours. And he said, I don't know how this is inclusionary or prideful that you have drag queens twerking in front of children. I mean, all of this crazy stuff, right?
Yeah, and he's just saying that, and he's saying that while being exclusionary. And we talked about this when this happened, I think, when this first happened, and when we were talking about how Denmark is one of the most open countries you can be in. And
It was, yeah. I mean, it was one of the first countries in Europe that said decriminalized gay sex, and it has a long history of being very open in terms of women's rights, in terms of gender fluidity and gender sexual expression, and so they one of the arguments made by opponents of gay pride flyers downtown is that we want to brand Solvang as Solvang. We want to brand the Danish heritage. Well, the thing is, part and parcel of that Danish heritage that they say they want to brand is a real openness towards whatever sexual option you were interested in.
But they, they were going to paint these rainbows and paint the curbs and all that kind of stuff. So it's not just Clark, right? I mean, is it
There's a 5 members on the.
There's that, and there's a pervasive idea of if I don't agree with you, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see anything having to do with drag queens. I don't want to see anything having to do with pride flags, because I don't agree with it. I don't want to be reminded of it. And they take this idea of it's grooming the children, but that, I mean, all of that is just kind of.
Well, I think the real problem with drag queen story hour is it interferes with the banning of books, which really is what we ought to be
right
focused on.
But the Solvang City Council is going to be revisiting this issue on Monday, and before that, there's been a release of texts and emails from Robert Clark, this council member, and it's very, it's sort of unbridled bigotry. It's not like you don't need a dog whistle. There's no silent dog.
Not anymore. No, you get the foghorn. I mean,
he's loud and proud in terms of his hostility.
All right. Well, I suppose the key question for Solvang is, how do you sell more skeevers with diversity, equity, and inclusion, or anti-wokeness? I mean, you think this is something that would affect tourism, or it's just a kind
it will hurt tourism a lot.
Yeah,
I think that Solvang will not help its tourist profile by this. I think.
I think we've seen a lot of examples across the country recently where either transphobia or homophobia, people start to boycott something, but it doesn't really like the Bud Light thing recently. You see, they're getting more popularity online because of people doing these complaining about it. So I feel like, I don't know, it's not going to, they're going to really just keep people out of Solvang if you keep doing this. It's not really going to bring a lot of people in to agree, like, oh yeah, we agree with Robert Clark, we're going to come visit Solvang now. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to get out. Ryan, you had an interesting piece about superblooms, which everybody, I mean, in the national media, you can't go to any site without them.
You can see them from space now. I've seen a couple photos. You can see the Rizzo planes from space. So I highly recommend, if you got a time to go drive out a couple hours.
What's the best place? What
Rizzo has some of the best big views. If you can't really get out of town, Botanic Gardens is good. Going through Casitas Pass in Ojai, it's also really good views of the hills, and just seeing the water up to where it is right now is kind of a reminder of how lucky we are to live in California.
All right. And Josh, you had a couple of interesting pieces about development issues, the platform and Toontown. What's going on with that? Those real quickly.
Well, the Toontown is what one of the members of ABR described it as, but this is the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation building the All Abilities Playground, which is going to go at the Dwight Murphy Park. And so there was a meeting to look at the architectural design. There's a magical treehouse, and there's a ramp, and there's a net in the middle, and anybody can use it. So it's going to be a really big transformation of that park. And so they're looking at the design. They've all kind of agreed they're going to do this big renovation of the park and put some turf down there and make it, well, it's a locals park,
It'd be the first fully accessible park, right? Too.
between places far away from here, for
Yeah.
sure. I've heard that, maybe LA and San Francisco or something like that. So that was that, and that's everyone's really excited about that once they figure out what it's going to look like. ABR is so funny. They're like,
Well,
we
it was
love
so
the
funny.
treehouse,
Yeah,
but
they
we need more
wanted it
green.
more. They wanted it more goofy, which
Yeah, well, they're like, there's too much of the treehouse that we see. So can you put some more fake trees there, like more greenery around it? So and they called it Toontown. The platform, now this is a really interesting thing. It's a big rubble yard, the corner of Yananoli and Garden. It's storage, and it's just rocks and concrete and boulders. The owner wants to build this little market restaurant area that would be the anchor of the funk zone. And there's
sort of
underground
sort of
parking.
the entrance to the funk zone.
Yeah, and so he's proposing that. They liked the concept, but they did not like the design.
Is it all commercial? Is it all commercial? Is there any housing?
All commercial, no housing.
Oh.
It'll be right across from the hotel that will be mostly hotel and maybe some employee
Is
housing.
this Bill Wright's land too?
No, it is not Bill Wright's plan. It's a different owner. Yeah.
Okay.
There's 3 big projects going in there.
And Nick, of course, we got Earth Day coming up. Is it April 22nd officially, which is coincidentally the date that a certain newspaper accused me of violating federal crimes. But that's a story for another day too. But you have a profile of Leah Stokes. Who is she?
Leah Stokes is a UCSB environmental studies, political science, Brennan School political science professor. And she is probably more ubiquitous as a media presence than John Palminteri. She's probably more ubiquitous than all of us put together times John Palminteri.
Well, yeah, that's not hard. Yeah.
But she is, you can't pick up a New York Times op-ed section without seeing a considered opinion from Leah Stokes about climate change, and
they are well considered. She's smart, right?
She's been a media critic, initially saying the media isn't reporting enough about it. Then the media is not reporting enough about the solutions. She just wrote a book. She has a podcast. She is like everywhere, and more than that, her whole scholarship, her whole research is really studying the response by the oil companies and the utility companies to environmental legislation and how they have thwarted them.
Yeah, that was interesting. That whole thing about, you all cover it when it happens, and then you never cover what actually occurs afterwards.
But what she calls the spectacle of passage and the implementation fard. And so and sometimes there's 20 years between implementation and passage. And so her whole point was she was advising the Senate Democrats in the passage of this landmark climate change bill.
Disguised as an inflation reduction bill.
Disguised as that. And that, how do they sort of how do they plan for what the industry will do? And so she was involved in trying to get all these different environmental groups mobilized so that they would, the legislators and their staff would be hearing from people who supported the measure, not just those who were saying, oh my God, my bills are going up. And so she is actually quite an influential person, I think, from a national point of view, who I mean, we've all known about Leah Stokes, but I didn't get quite
Yeah,
as.
no, that's what was interesting about it. You know, it was just sort of one of those things that's hiding in plain sight. Hey, here's somebody, you know, you never get respect in your hometown,
Right.
but it was good. And I recommend everybody pick up the paper this week and take a look. All right. Well, nothing I've heard today has convinced made me drop my opinion that we are in the middle of a human extinction event. So thanks very much to Ryan P. Cruz, Nick Welsh, and Josh Molina. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.